This video is about classifying quadrilaterals. All right, it's lesson 27 for our geometry class. What we're going to focus on here is how the markings of four-sided figures really tell us more information about what specifically they are. So things we have to pay attention to are, for instance, tick marks on the sides, the arrows on the sides to show parallelism. This first picture that I have in front of us is really the key, but we're going to take it one step further for our notes today and simply draw examples of all these pictures to kind of get us used to each of the different figures, and also so that we can talk a little bit more about them. So the first one that we're going to draw, and please excuse if my drawings are not that great, I'm not an artist, but the first one is a quadrilateral. What makes a figure a quadrilateral is it has four sides and it's closed. All right, so for example, if I have a figure that looks something like this, 1, 2, 3, and 4 sides. Okay, there's nothing in there to indicate that there's any kind of parallel sides. There's nothing to indicate that any measurements are the same. Therefore, this kind of figure would simply be called a quadrilateral. All right. What's the difference between closed and not closed? So if I were to sketch this, 1, 2, 3, 4, that has four sides to it. 1, 2, 3, 4. But it doesn't close off, so then that would not be a quadrilateral. Now, once a figure is a quadrilateral, one that I like to talk about is what's called a trapezium. Now, a trapezium, if you look up here, we don't have a picture for it. So another name really for a quadrilateral is a trapezium. Okay, so kind of think that this goes the same way. This is more just for Leanhart. You don't need to know this for your Kudo stuff or for any kind of a quiz or anything. All right. A kite, however, is a trapezium or a quadrilateral in which two pair of consecutive sides are congruent. So what's that going to look like as a sketch? And again, please pardon, my markings get a little wavy. But what are we going to know? We're going to know two sides are congruent to each other that are right next to each other. That's what it means by consecutive sides. And another pair of two sides are congruent to each other. All right, so a kite is a trapezium or quadrilateral in which two pair of consecutive sides are congruent. If you see this, this is called a kite. Now, if we start to look at parallel sides, the first one is called a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides, or a trapezoid. A trapezoid is typically going to look something like this. We're going to start with two sides that we know are going to be parallel to each other. Okay, so for example, how do I know they're parallel? We're going to see those little arrows on them. If I simply have two sides that are parallel, or one pair of parallel sides, then I have what's called a trapezoid. Okay? If I take that trapezoid and the other two sides are also congruent, so let me draw a sketch of what that's going to look like. So we're going to have two parallel sides, and then the non-parallel sides are going to be congruent. This is what is known as an isosceles trapezoid. So the top and the bottom are parallel, and the left and the right are congruent. This is what makes an isosceles trapezoid. Okay, so we went from quadrilateral with no parallel sides, trapezoid with one pair of parallel sides. What if it has two pair of parallel sides? They call that a parallelogram. A parallelogram, generally speaking, looks something like this when we see it. How do I know it's a parallelogram? I know because we have one pair of parallel sides and a second pair of parallel sides. Now, we're going to learn all kinds of properties about the parallelogram, but number one, what makes it a parallelogram is two pair of opposite sides parallel. Okay? If we look at a parallelogram and we get more specific, we have the first one here, it's called a rhombus. So what makes a rhombus? Well, a rhombus is a parallelogram, but in this parallelogram, not only are all or two pair of parallel sides, but we also know, and this is where it starts to get confusing because we're adding marks, but we also know, I'm going to use green here, all four sides are equal. So what makes a rhombus different from a parallelogram is it has four congruent sides. Okay? What about a rectangle? What makes a rectangle? It's a parallelogram, but this parallelogram, what makes it unique, so let me continue making a parallelogram. There, it's a parallelogram, two pair of opposite sides parallel. But what makes it unique is all four angles are congruent. And specifically, all four angles are right angles. Now, in this, all they really need to do is tell me that one of the angles is a right angle. And if it's a parallelogram with one right angle, we know all the angles are going to be right angles. Okay? All right, and our last one that we have is a square. So what makes a square? It's a parallelogram. So we know the left and the right are parallel, the top and the bottom are parallel. But it also has four equal sides, which makes it a rhombus. And it has four right angles, four equal angles. So what makes a square so unique? It's actually a combination of three different figures. It's a parallelogram, that's a rhombus, and also a rectangle all at the same time. All right, either use the diagrams that we did or come back here to the top and use this image to help you to answer all the questions on CUDA Works until you run out of questions. Good luck.